at the end of my rainbow. Yes, and someday I will find her on a parkway blue blinder. On a parkway blue blinder. Someday I will find her. Yes, and someday I will find her on a parkway blue blinder. On a parkway blue blinder. On a parkway. On a parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves fall like confetti in a New York parade. On the parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves fall like confetti in a New York parade.
Throw up that sound technical.
There we go. Let me try it one more time. Welcome, everybody. Here we are, Scenic City Sports. Sorry about that. Every time I have to take the podcast stuff one more time. Welcome, everybody. Here we are, Scenic City Sports.
The source of the media. So here we are.
Just wanted to join you guys on this Sunday afternoon. Rusty Rob Scott will be joining us here.
Here we are.
Just wanted to
rapidly working.
Yeah, I was going to say, rapidly working to put the paper together. Just wanted to rapidly working. Yeah, I was going to say, everybody who don't understand this, that is the hardest part to me. Rapidly working. Everybody who don't understand this, that is the hardest part to me.
A lot of folks that don't always
Everybody who don't understand this, that is the hardest part to me. Anybody out there that's never covered everybody who don't understand this, that is the hardest part to me. Anybody out there that's never covered so when Scott finishes in baseball games, there could be track stocks so when Scott matches in baseball games, there could be track stocks so football, basketball, there could be number of things so football,
maybe you in some alley tomorrow.
Yes, number of things so and he does a hell of a job covering everything. Yes, so I will always have Scott do a hell of a job covering everything. Those of you out there, I'm imagining that a lot of watch. Sorry, I'm trying to do like 4 those of you out there, I'm imagining that a lot of the 151st Kentucky Derby and is the 109th. Get a chance to watch it. Kentucky very the 109th. Get a chance to watch it. Kentucky everything that is built to be. It is what do they call it? Get a chance to watch it. Kentucky everything that is built what exactly it is. What do they call it? Kentucky well, everything that is built what exactly it is. What do they call it? Well, everything that is built what exactly it is. What do they call it? Well, everything that is built what exactly it is. Ideas would be all well, everything that is built what exactly it is. Ideas, yes, it was
Talks about it, I go on to another leg where you can triple crown money. And what that does to another leg where services that are rendered later on in life. And what that does to millions of money later on in life. What that does to
millions upon millions upon millions
later on in life.
what they call millions upon millions offspring desire, as we would say. And just to throw this out there, yesterday's offspring desire entire field. And just to throw this within the family tree, yesterday's offspring desire entire field. And just to throw this within the family tree, yesterday's offspring desire entire field. And just to throw this within the family tree, yesterday's offspring desire entire field. And just to throw this within the family tree,
every could win that race on any given day. Just to show every could win that race on any given day. Just to show every what that race on any given day. Just to show
you know, when we talk about great racing, you know, when you talk about, there's only going to be really about 3 to 5 races. You know, we talk about, we joke, there's only a lot of times on the show, really, we speak in races. You know, we speak in rush, we talk about who's our rush, there's only this, who's our rush, that we speak, and if you are talking, we speak in rush, we talk about who's our rush, the Mount Rushmore of that, of horsemen. I mean, we talk about Secretary of Mount, we're talking about Man of War, of horsemen, Man of War is one of the most famous. Secretary of Mount, we're talking about one of the most famous horses of all time. We're talking about most famous. Secretary of Mount, we're talking about one of the most famous horses of all time. We're talking about most famous. So, you know, you're talking about one of the most famous horses of all time. There's 2 or 3 most famous. You got like, so, you know, you're talking about one of the most famous. There's ones I can think of. You know, so, you know, you're talking about one of the most famous. There's ones I can think of. You know, so, you know, you're talking about there's ones I can think of. You know, there's ones I can the amount of money, and, you know, we talked about, Rob and I talked about this off the screen, the amount of money that is involved, and, you know, we talked about horse racing, Rob and I talked, I mean, I'm sure, and I didn't, the amount that I'm sure that involved yesterday, we talked about horse racing, Rob and I talked, I mean, I'm sure, and I didn't, the amount that I was going to say, and I would say I'm sure pay racing, Rob and I talked, I mean, I'm sure, and I didn't, the amount that I was going to say, and I would say,
I don't know if it's 5 million or not.
I would bet you.
I don't know if it's 5 million or not.
I figure a good trainer, if the horse was from good lineage, I figure what they pay for that horse to start with, you know, what did it take to get that lineage where it was, you know, what they pay for that horse to start with, you know, what did it take to get that, the amount of money is staggering, but then what they pay for that horse to start with, if you have a derby, and the amount of money is staggering, but then and then you can put that horse out and stay derby, and the amount of money 12 years, and the sire that horse out and stay derby, and the amount of 100 children,
Well, the Secretary of
and the sire that horse out and stay derby, 100 children,
Well, the Secretary of
and the sire I'm sure
There's some folks that went to court over that.
100 children,
Well, the Secretary of
and the sire
There's some folks that went to court over that.
100 children,
Well, the Secretary of
and the sire
Some folks, I believe we're you never know what I believe we're I find it interesting. You never know what I believe we're I find it interesting. You never know what I believe we're we talked about those horses out west. You never know what I believe we're and we talked about those horses out west. How big a deal that is. This race is trying to talk about those horses out west. How big a deal that is. This race is trying to talk about because getting in a huddle is what they've been used to.
No, and it's the because what does a jockey get paid to run that race? If a jockey wins that race, what is his share as the winning jockey? What is his share for that race? If a jockey wins that race, what is his? I was watching the race as the winning jockey. What is his share for that race? If a jockey wins together, and we always I was watching the race as we all left the house. We all if a jockey wins together, everybody chooses. I was watching what we do is make it fair. We all all the numbers is fast. Everybody chooses. We draw the tickets. What we do is make it fair. We all so I drew everybody. My horse was number 12. What we do is make it fair. We all so but I at one time my horse was number 12. Was right out there at the third. I'm like, hey, this is looking good. And then that number now my horse was number 12. Was right out there at the third. His jockey leads him up inside. And then that number now all of a sudden he had a pot of 5 horses. His jockey leads him. He never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. And unfortunately he never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. And unfortunately he never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. And unfortunately he never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. And unfortunately he never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. And unfortunately he never sniffed the lead. And say that number now. No, all of a sudden he got a pot. He got stuck. It always makes me nervous as a sportsman to watch those. It always makes me nervous because as a to watch a broken leg or something like that because and you watch it and a broken leg. You obviously know what it is, but when you see them get in that broken leg, it always makes me nervous because I'm always thinking, man, if somebody moves, it always makes me nervous because I'm always this is going to look like a buddy of mine makes a joke all the time. But it's kind of the same thing. This is going to look like a buddy of mine makes a joke all the time. You're literally talking about, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. And so, it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. And so, it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. And so, it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. And so, it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about.
5 years ago, I think it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. 5 years ago, I think it's like the big highway at Talladega is what you're talking about. 5 years ago, I think it's like the big highway at
You mean Amish NASCAR?
That's what I just said.
Yeah. No, I've heard about 3 people referring to that today as Amish NASCAR, and I just.
Well, we talked about the big purse, but from also the standpoint, the fact that how much is already in these horses to start with.
Oh God!
So they win a big purse,
millions.
But they've got a lot, and it's what they do to win these races. Of course, if he could go on to win the Triple Crown, the lineage that they can, they can charge moving forward.
And you might have mentioned already, but for those of you who didn't know, every horse in that race yesterday was a descendant of Secretariat.
Yes.
Every single one of them. So here's the thing. You think about it, it's a $5 million prize for winning the Kentucky Derby. Okay, that doesn't even cover what they've probably paid for the horse, what they've probably paid in trainers' fees.
We were kind of trying to figure out,
fees.
how much kind of money we're talking in that.
So, I mean, you're just by winning $5 million.
It's a nice check that we get, but we're still probably in the hole.
You're still probably in the hole. But what's going to happen now is, especially if it's a male horse, I mean, the breeding fees are going to go through the roof.
Yep.
Later on, and that's when you're going to really start to make.
Well, I said that a minute ago. What is the estate of Secretariat really worth?
I mean, again, there were 20 horses in the race yesterday. All of them were direct descendant of Secretariat in some form or fashion. So, I mean, that's probably $100 million worth of horses right there.
There again, he was the most dominant horse back in 1973 to take on all those. But look what we're still talking about him.
Yeah.
He's the Babe Ruth of
ESPN named him one of the top athletes.
And you should.
Of the 20.
You should.
I guess you probably have to. I mean, he was, everybody talks about that one race, the Belmont, where he just absolutely destroyed the rest of the field.
31 links, yeah, I was going to say.
31. He wins the other two races in the Triple Crown, but they weren't by a whole lot. I mean, they were relatively close. And then he comes out in the Belmont and just, decides, all right, boys, I'm going to go.
Of the race?
Yes, it's a mile and a half, if I'm not mistaken. Derby's a mile and an eighth, and then Preakness is a mile and a quarter.
When you really think about it, and I was listening to how they were coming up to start the race with the certain odds. They really don't have a whole lot to go on. Okay, this horse won that race. This horse won that race. If he wins two races and he finishes second or third in one, all of a sudden he's the favorite in the whole field.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
really, we don't know that to be so.
Luxor Cafe, which is the horse I had drawn yesterday for the pool. He had won the last four races.
East Avenue is the horse I drew.
And I thought, okay, well, I may have a shot. He was never a factor at all. And of course, the conditions yesterday with the rain and the mud, it just changes everything completely. Running on dirt as opposed to running on turf, and
we also said this. Yes, all those horses are thoroughbreds, but the decision on what the jockeys do in that race, because we were talking about. Well, they were talking about, the experts, how these horses coming from California have been used to running in 5-horse races, 4-horse races. They've never been in that situation to where they can get into a huddle there, and how do I get out of it, and what's the panic like. But Rusty was talking about his horse yesterday being in a good spot. His jockey moved him inside, and before he knew it, he was boxed in. Yeah,
you've got to. I mean, it's they study this stuff, and they know when the horse needs to go and when to get him on the outside. But at the same time, I mean, you can't predict what's going to happen in a race. All of a sudden, somebody decides to change strategy right there, and all of a sudden you're boxed in or you're on the rail and you can't get through, and now you've got to let it off and try to get around, and it's too late.
And like NASCAR that Rusty brought up, there's
a lot of similarities.
You can make a crazy bad mistake,
mm-hmm.
We see wrecks in NASCAR because of a gritty mistake maybe, or an unnecessary chance.
Somebody gets too close to the wall, and all of a sudden
we wouldn't want to see that in those horses.
No, but they bump each other and they jostle each other, and it slows them down a little bit. Then it slows down the pack behind them, and you just never know. I heard one of the jockeys, I think it was Bob Baffert's. He had to replace one of the horses. And they asked him, what's going to be the strategy, because you're like on, gate 1 or whatever. He said, come out fast and stay fast.
Yeah, and get out of the way.
Yeah, you got to get down there.
And I don't think his horse did that.
No,
but that made sense.
Yeah,
don't get bogged down in all that.
But it's just, I don't watch much horse racing at all. 364 days out of the year.
I mean, how many? Unless you are,
I'll watch the Triple Crown race.
Most people, unless you are a part of that community, or you live in Kentucky or New York or somewhere with a track, I would venture to say that probably less than 20% of America watches horse racing on a regular basis. I mean,
if that much.
If that.
But all of a sudden, first Saturday in May comes around,
We all pretend we've
it's
been.
become just an absolutely fantastic
Well, yeah,
event.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We're already sitting here. You know, the wifey and me were driving around today discussing all the new little, decoration things we wanted to try to get a hold of before next year's Derby party.
It almost made a joke yesterday, but the guys that were on the set, the main ones, and I know the one guy does NBC Sports, so he has a bunch of stuff. The other two are involved in horse racing. I'm like, what do they do with these people the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, they're
we just put them in storage and hey, we'll bring you out in May.
Well, now here.
Hey, Chuck, we got a race coming up.
They're Mel Kipers.
Well, yeah.
They're prepared for one show a year.
I wonder if they could do like a horse draft. That'd be hilarious.
Rob and I talked, Scott, off the air, and I know I can speak for you and that you'll be tickled to be a part of this discussion. And what we wanted to do is and I'm going to throw it out there for anybody that's paying attention, that's watched the show, will watch the show this week. Put yours in the comments below us, and I'll put a post up so that everybody can do the same. So the discussion is, if you were to choose a Mount Rushmore of Chattanooga area sports personalities, and who would your 4 be? And I'm not going to say that we have a definitive 4. I just thought it might be fun for
Chattanooga area.
For
Scenic
us
City.
Sitting here for 20 or 30 minutes, it might be fun for us to throw out some names.
And there's some
To me,
so there's some
go ahead,
names
Rob.
and there's some names that I want to throw out a name just to get it out of the way because this is a name that none of us got to see his works, but we get to hear about it. Joe Engel. What he meant to the Chattanooga community in being a sports personality. If there's any belief in what we read, Scott, and what we hear from folks older than us, he was like a he was like a magician as far as entertainment, as far as sports.
He
right?
was Bill Veck before Bill Veck came around. He was Charlie Finley before Charlie Finley came around. He was Mark Cuban before Mark Cuban came around. I mean,
all on a smaller scale, naturally.
I mean, he gave away a house.
Did he now?
Yeah. There was a giveaway. The Lookouts actually gave away a house at one point. And he came up with, the used car nights that are still being done today.
And if you saw pictures back in the day, you saw the tremendous crowds that were down there.
Used car night.
He's on there.
One of the.
He is on there. If there is nobody else that's on that list, Joe Engel is on that list.
Okay, and it was a name that I felt like we didn't know enough about from a standpoint that we got to live with his lineage, but he seemed to mean a lot to everybody that was much older than us and what he meant to this town.
Yeah.
Well,
just decades and decades into.
We're not, and let me preface this into, we're not just saying specifically media personalities. We're talking about Chattanooga sports people that became bigger than life in the Chattanooga area, because there are a handful of them that not only were they great at their particular vocation, whether that was coaching, broadcasting, playing, whatever it was they were someone who, in old school mafia terminology, they walked into a room and people snapped at a table. There were people that could walk in. One that just popped into my head because I was kind of looking around the room and I caught a UTC logo in the side eye, and I thought about Scrappy Moore being one.
That'd be another good one.
Ward's named after him.
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody.
The mascot's named after him.
The practice field is named after him.
Yeah.
He popped into my head.
I've got 2 that came to mind really quick, other than Joe Engel, because Joe Engel came to mind.
Go ahead.
One's Reggie White.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If we're gonna add athletes to it, Reggie has got to be on the list. If not, but I think this guy deserves to be on it anyway. Jim Reynolds.
Oh yeah.
Well,
we had talked about him
we
off
brought
air.
JR up.
40 years now of
Yes, yeah.
doing everything.
Doing a lot. Doing a lot.
You know, and I mentioned the other day, I was as excited for Jim Reynolds when the Mocs won the NIT about a month ago
Oh, yeah.
as I was for anybody
Yes.
else, because he
Yes.
has been there since
Well, he's over 45 years, I think, right here in town.
he just turned 70.
and that
Well, so-
and he's doing a lot for UTC. Had a little bit of time there with the Lookouts as well, but and you heard me comment on JR. JR does a fine job as a play-by-play guy. If you listen to him on the radio, some of his points are he's always letting you know the time. And he's always letting you know the situation. I mean,
yeah.
you're not there, so you're relying upon him giving you that information.
And I listened to a bunch of play-by-play with satellite radio from a lot of different, and there's some that just haven't learned that yet. And
He's good
you're
about
always like,
letting you know where
tell
we're
me,
at.
Tell me what
JR
quarter
is
we're
like
at.
having a running clock on the screen with you.
Well, I've heard him
without
talk.
him
I've
having to
heard
say
him
it.
talk about that before.
I mean,
and he spoke about somebody that he mentored under, and how they stressed that needed to be brought up.
And I saw something on Facebook that was very similar to this the other day, and it was Chattanooga's all-time like media
I saw it.
personalities.
They had the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, you know, if we were doing just sports media personalities in Chattanooga, who would it be? But like I said, if you add the athletes in there,
Well,
it
if you had
kinda
the, I
changes
mean,
everything.
because let's be honest, we don't have that many. Chattanooga doesn't have but a handful of athletes that went on to professional success on a scale that we would put on this list. I mean, Rick Honeycutt, Reggie White, you know, there's a handful.
Yeah. Born and raised here.
But, you know, when you talk about sports personalities, I mean, obviously, I'm going to get this one out of the way immediately because we'd be fools to not throw him in there from the very beginning, and that's Stump Martin, our very own mentor and personal friend. And you can't say enough for all the things that Stump did in the media, but also in sports for softball and football and youth sports and just everything that he did. Stump deserves to be in the conversation on that list.
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. B deserves to be in the conversation on that list. His brother deserves to be on that in the conversation on that list. The Music Man,
Quake and Joe.
Cowboy Joe. You know, these
and
guys.
I'm gonna throw another name, and well, I'll throw 2 or 3 names out there. Randy Smith,
Yep,
Daryl Patterson,
absolutely.
and Rick Nyman too. Rick Nyman
has
been here a
a
long time,
foundational figure in local sports now for the last.
and Ben
well
Bobick over
over
at Channel
20
3
years.
has really
Ben
done a
Bobick.
great job,
Well,
even though he hasn't been here as long as.
And let me
some
say
of the
this
other
about
ones.
Rick and Ben. They're both doing outstanding work. I mean, you know, sometimes I'm fortunate enough to get home in time to catch one of them's Friday night go-to watch, and they're both doing outstanding work. You know, you mentioned Randy Smith. Randy Smith was a stellar on TV, but he also had that voice that lingered up into Knoxville as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like one time I think Stump used to say people thought he might be the future voice of the Vols.
Oh yeah, he was
and
considered,
his
from what
voice
I
would have
understand.
been very good to listen to.
Yeah.
And then of course you got 30 years plus. Maybe I'm shortening that. Maybe it's more than 30 years of Daryl Patterson being on Channel 9, to which I believe during their era, Channel 9 was the dominant.
They had such a good that 4-person news crew that they had.
They had the ratings
with
in
him
my
and
opinion.
Pascal and Bob Johnson and Mary Ellen Locher. You know, just you know, and then
then you also had Grandpappy Welch.
Yeah, we had
the
Welch on
original
there,
one.
and
Daryl
this
Patterson
and that,
is honestly it is one of the reasons I got into this business, because I grew up watching him,
yes,
thinking I could see myself doing that.
But look at all the good that Daryl also did. All those years of doing the Daryl Patterson's, the Daryl Patterson golf tournament that he did every year.
Yep.
You know, you throw him in there. You know, I'm thinking Larry Ward with the Chattanooga Lookouts.
He was another one that came to mind.
You know, Larry has been the play-by-play man for the Lookouts for how many years now? 30 plus,
Almost
40
30,
plus.
yeah.
I mean, you know, Larry has been awesome. I wouldn't put him, and I'm going to give him a nod because he's my friend, and I know it'll tickle him to death for me to say this,
No,
but I mean this when I say it. Red Zone Ron Hall has done a little bit of everything. He's been on the radio. He's been on television. He's been the voice of the Lookouts. He's been the voice of the Mocs. He's been the voice of the Lady Mocs. Mm-hmm. He's done it at a high level now for going on, golly, now what, 15?
Ridgeland Panthers.
Ridgeland, East Ridge.
Pioneers.
How many years now? 15, 18 years, I think, somewhere in that range Ron has done this. So, I wouldn't put Ron in the top 4, but I'm damn sure going to give him a shout-out because he deserves it. Gary McGoy is another one. I wouldn't put Gary in the top 4, but he damn sure deserves a shout-out because he does a hell of a job at what he does.
And then on the newspaper side of it,
Stephen
Hargis, Lindsey Young, David Pascal, Ward Gossett.
Mm-hmm. Give Stump Martin another nod on that side.
Oh, why did I just draw a blank on his name? Not the columnist. Why can't I not think of his name?
Weidmer?
Yeah, Mark Weidmer.
Mark Weidmer.
And Scott, you're not doing anything but saying that we know that the paper has shrunk through the years, through the decades, I guess, but still, what Hargis and them bring in print.
Yeah.
And who do we always reach out to when we want to know something before we're supposed to know something?
Yeah.
So those guys have their places too. Anytime you're putting a Mount Rushmore together, and that's what we're going to try to do in this, you can argue it. You can argue that we left somebody off that should have been on there. Mm-hmm. Most Mount Rushmores are being argued about. We sit here and argue about Mount Rushmores of wrestling, and we never do seem to agree on all 4.
No.
And it'll be similar
two
here,
top,
but
yeah.
all these names that you're hearing brought up are so much worthy of us bringing them up. Just that some of them may have a bigger impact than maybe a few others. And we have some insights on some people there that you might say, well, what has he done? Well, you talk about Stump Martin. We have a great insight to all the things that Stump did. We and others like us, there's things that Stump had such a connection, and for a long time, with high school coaches.
Oh, yeah.
They were constantly sharing information with him of what they knew and what they suspected. And that came out long before the announcement in the paper was being made. Also, his time involved in youth sports.
Well, he told us a story about how he went from the Catoosa County News to the Chattanooga Free Press is because he had the list of who the Ridgeland coaches were going to be, who they were going to hire to be the first coaches, and he had it
spot on.
Yeah, before anybody else did, before anybody else knew, and he made like one phone call, the next thing you know,
Stump was a lot like the way that our own Nathan Cook is. Stump was very easy to talk to. He was very knowledgeable about whatever he was talking to you about. Mm-hmm. And he had this innate ability to make anyone feel at ease. Mm-hmm. So he kept those secrets when people told him stuff. Yeah. As far as, he might have told us, but he didn't tell anybody out in the public that was going to break this news. But, he kept those secrets. Those people realized I could trust him. And he had confidants all over this city that we knew stuff. I can think back, there were times when we knew things months in advance before it got announced and things like that. Yeah. And that is a testament to how trusted he was in that community.
Yeah. And you got to do it like that sometimes in that line of work. I know that for a fact, because you don't want to ruin trust that you've built up with coaches and administrators and athletic directors,
all for a story.
Yeah,
all for a story.
Well, it's a great story, but you just ruined
the next.
You ruined 10 years worth of stories coming up.
I'm not going to jeopardize them saying don't come back.
Well, that's why you see a lot of times when you see, like in movies and stuff, you'll see a reporter walk up to a coach or a player, and the player will immediately say something to the effects of this on the record or off the record. Mm-hmm. On the record, I'm going to give you this. off the record, I'll tell you what's really happening.
And that's why I make sure if I'm going to quote them, hey, can I quote you on this? Or
can I quote
hey, I'm going to record you if that's okay.
Then no.
But, I know what needs to go and what doesn't need to go.
Right.
Whatever, but there's and I was just looking at the date. Next Saturday, matter of fact, be 7 years.
7 years, wow.
7 years since we lost it. May 10th, 2018 was the.
I knew it was coming up, but I couldn't remember.
Phone call.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew it was coming up, but I couldn't remember how many years we were.
It's 2018.
We were pushing on.
Because we started this one about 3 months later.
Yeah, we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did, and you guys were the first game.
We
had
already
Lafayette.
Had been discussing
Ridgeland,
it for a while.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard to believe it's been.
Yeah.
That long.
Yeah.
Well, I told that story, and I know we're getting off base here a
No.
little bit on, but I think if I remember correctly, I think Stump died on a Thursday, I think, and I was there on a Tuesday afternoon. He died on a Thursday morning, and I can honestly say on that Tuesday afternoon, what he was chatting with me about and was in very good spirits. I did not, a little discomfort, but I did not think in less than 36 hours he'd be gone. Guess what he was talking about?
Baseball.
Nope.
Football
Jamboree.
Yeah.
He was trying to put the jamboree
so it's one or the other.
and the games and the matchups together.
Yeah.
For Todd, and that's what was going on. That was what was going on.
He was still
afternoon.
He was still promoting kids all the way to the very end.
I remember the last time I saw him or talked to him was like a month before, and I actually brought him dinner one night over his house, and I've wrote about this, but it's like, well, how you feeling? What? And he's like, I don't. He said, I'm okay. I don't want to talk about it. He said, tell me about this kid.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me about this kid. Which teams are going to the baseball playoffs? Is this kid having a good year? This kid. It was kids that he had coached. And we talked for an hour about nothing but high school baseball. And I left and told him, I loved him, and I'd talk to him again here before too much longer. And I never got back to see him when he went to the hospital that last time, because I'd been up there once before, and I felt guilty about it for a while.
He knew.
And then it hit me. I'm like, I didn't need to see it.
You were doing
I didn't
your
need to
job,
talk
though,
to him again.
And he understood that.
Well, that last conversation was what he wanted to talk about. It was on his terms. And that's good enough for me.
I remember Greg Payne and I went up there. Rob went up on Tuesday, and I think Greg and I went up on Wednesday, I believe. Greg and I went on Wednesday, and I remember sitting over there, and where he could hear me, I sat on the edge of the bed with him for about 30 minutes, and we talked about the modernization of literally we were talking about modernizing the show and doing some of the things that we do now. We were talking about doing all the way back then, here and there. And then I remember, I'm lucky enough to be able to say this. I know I am one of the last people to talk to him, because on late Wednesday, early Thursday, when they started talking to him about his treatments and stuff, dialysis was one of the things that was discussed with him. And he called me because I was, at that time, I was only about a year and a half out of, I was about just over 2 years post-transplant at that time. And he talked to me about it. He called me and he said, all right, talk to me about this. Tell me what I got to know. And we talked for about an hour. And I felt like that he was going to go ahead with whatever that was. But then again, I also felt like from the very beginning, and I think all of us will agree with this, I think he was completely peaceful with whatever, he was at peace with whatever happened. I mean, Stump was a godly man, a worldly man, and I don't think he had any doubt where he was going in the hereafter.
Yeah.
And he knew that. And so he was comfortable with it, and he was at peace with it. So my thing at that point was to be comfortable and at peace with him, and that was what I did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously we're we didn't want to bring you guys out there down, but it's hard for us sometimes when it's healing for us all still that when we get a chance to talk about him, we still talk about him.
Well, we miss him dearly.
We do, and keeps
that's why we bring him up so often. But his work is still out there, so we get to still play on that playground of the work that has been laid upon us.
We wouldn't be here doing this right now.
No, we wouldn't have felt. We wouldn't have fell in love with the idea and the notion of all the things that he meant. And so many times Stump talked about. A lot of folks thought, he just wants a TV show. He wants a TV show so he can talk about you.
Yeah.
Talk about your kid, your coach, your community, your uniforms. Sometimes bad.
Yeah.
But that was a platform to give that information out on, and it's part of our idealisms that we want to continue.
I mean, how many smaller schools did we feature on Stump on Sports that would then go on and turn into powerhouse programs? How many times did we go cover Boyd Buchanan in the years when Boyd Buchanan had a lot of trouble finding a win?
Yeah.
And then we were with them.
Then they surfaced.
Then they surfaced, and we were with them through it all. We were with all the schools that I can count. I was talking about my forerunner the other day.
Well, hey, Lakeview wasn't exactly killing it before
No,
John
God,
Allen
no.
got up there, waved a wand.
But
some things went real well.
I was talking to someone about my Toyota the other day, and I said, if you understood how many times this vehicle has gone to state championship games, state playoffs, state quarterfinals. Scott and I drove that thing to Nashville, Knoxville, all over Upper Tennessee.
Well, you need to put that in that resume when you're trying to sell it.
I know, I'm telling you, and we've drove it all the way down to, the Atlanta area and some of those areas down there. Me and Thomas Gray one time drove it all the way to Buford for a state championship game.
What do y'all think?
Yeah, we went so many places over the years for these teams, and that was all Stump's brainchild. Lord Scott and I drove all the way to Hawkinsville, Georgia to cover Gordon Lee one night.
Got lost.
Yeah, if we hadn't saw the light of the stadium, I don't know that we would have even found it.
I'll never
night.
forget, we turn off, it's like Highway 26, and all of a sudden I see Dale Forster, of all people. I'm like, hey, there's Dale Forster. Okay, we're going to follow Dale Forster because
Dale knows where he's going.
Dale knows where he's going. Corey was playing football at the time, so we're following him.
I would question that, but
Yeah.
Then we got separated, and we're on a highway with no street lights at all. Houses are probably 3 miles apart.
Yeah.
And we're like, where did Dale go? Because now we can't find. This is before we had GPS on our phones.
Yeah, and cell phones were suspect
Spotty
at best at this time.
So we're driving along, and all of a sudden Dale zooms by us this way, and I'm like, that was Dale. I was like,
he's lost it.
Crap, where are we going? So I said, let's just turn around. So we turn around, and we're driving. Now all of a sudden, I'll never forget, I'm seeing a glow off in the distance, and I went, that's got to be it.
There's the stadium.
There's nothing else here.
Let's go there.
That's got to be it. So we drive. It's like a mile and a half, and all of a sudden, we come up on the biggest Christmas tree light display I have ever seen. There must have been 100,000, 200,000 lights. You could see it for 2 miles away, and I'm like, oh, great.
Sounds more like a UFO sign.
Now what do we do? And I said, let's just keep going. Maybe we'll get back on the interstate. We'll call somebody, because now we're getting close to kickoff. And there's this giant barn. And I'm like, hey, why don't we just pull over to that farmhouse
and ask?
And let's see if anybody knows where this high school is. On the back side of the barn was the scoreboard.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, we found it.
There we go.
Like
we're here.
10 minutes before kickoff. We're like running to the field and trying to get the game done.
And it was cold that night. But, yeah. I can't.
We did get a police escort back to the Macon city
line.
Yeah,
we did.
And that's
honest to goodness.
And Rusty, that's why when you put out there, we're asking for other names as well. We don't want to miss names.
No.
We don't want to miss somebody that we should have said, oh, you're obviously right.
Yeah, no, everybody out there, come up with your people.
Sports personality for the Scenic City area.
And we've mentioned them before, but I want to go back and touch on Dr. B and Music Man and Joe Quake and even J. David Miller, who helped start that show. They were the first sports talk show in Chattanooga. And that was back on AM 1150, the only place you could you could get it.
What year are we dating ourselves?
89.
Yeah.
87. 87, 88. It might have been closer to 89. Somewhere in the late 80s, because I stumbled on them one day because I had an AM.
I started listening to them like mid '90s. I think is when I tuned in.
And I heard sports talk. I'm like, wait a minute, there's a sports talk show.
Yep.
Where's this coming from? Chattanooga. Wow. And then WJOC at the time had done sports.
Well, you know, those
you
guys.
could listen to that stuff, so.
Those guys stumbled on a formula for drive time radio that worked unbelievably for them, and that was, I mean, that is, you talk SEC football, you talk Atlanta Braves baseball, and you sprinkle in a little NFL here and there, and it works. And it's worked for a bazillion years now in Chattanooga, and there have been a lot of other people who have come along and who have tried to be the same type of formula, and it just does not work. And we've also had people that have come in from the outside and have tried that New York / Connecticut, Philadelphia, whatever kind of formula that you can come in here and you can be controversial, and that don't work. The people in Chattanooga want to talk about Tennessee football, Braves baseball, SEC, and every now and again they might like to talk about a high school rivalry, but that's about all they want to talk about.
Yeah, and we missed a name that I want to bring up because we've had him on the show before, and he's really escalated his game, in my opinion. That's Chris Goforth as a play-by-play announcer. And then he gets to go down there and be a part of that big-time radio station in Atlanta. We remember asking him who runs that town, and he said, well, it's Georgia Bulldogs, followed by probably the Braves, then the Falcons.
Yeah.
But it's Georgia Bulldogs, and you know, I can buy that. I really can, because I turn that stuff on as I run through Atlanta from time to time. Well, you don't run through Atlanta; you sit in Atlanta a lot, so you get to
92.9.
But forever it was Buck and Kincaid, and there was this one guy that used to call in from over, I think he was from Athens, and he would get on Kincaid like nobody's business and just, I mean, ride him for a while. But yeah, I mean, now, hell, Atlanta, you're talking the amount of talk shows in Atlanta on a given day. Yeah. I mean, you've probably got 20 different stations down there that all have a sports talk show. Mm-hmm. And Chattanooga just doesn't have that. I mean, we've had...
Chattanooga doesn't even have an ESPN affiliate at the moment. No. It's now in Cleveland.
I mean, look,
that's insane to me. It's
here's
still insane.
Here's how good that Sport Talk is. We tried, at the height of our popularity, we tried to compete head-to-head afternoon radio with Stump on ESPN radio. Yeah. We all mixed in. We did call-ins. We made appearances. At that time, we were as big in Chattanooga as we were anywhere else because we were covering 6 and 8 and 10 games on a Friday night. Mm. And we couldn't touch them.
Well, they have a strong.
And we had a following. We just could not touch them.
Yeah. And Scott, you said something about, ESPN not being here in town. You know what? I think a lot of it has to do with Sport Talk.
It does.
Oh yeah. That's why I don't really think there's somebody would argue and say there's room for two. Well, ratings wise there's not.
Yeah, the ratings would argue with you.
You can put one on if you want to.
Is it WFLI now is starting to do a little bit more sports here and there, and Chris Goforth's involved in some of it and stuff. So it's slowly trying to get back a little bit. I heard some some like nationally syndicated games.
TV and radios always end up basing themselves on ratings. I mean, great idea or great people involved, but you still got to have the ratings.
Yeah, but it just kills me that a city this size doesn't have a 24-hour dedicated sports station.
I mean,
it's
the reality of it is the ESPN model does not work here.
No,
it just does not. The ESPN model is to take sports like basketball and all that and run it and run it and run it and run it. and it is just not what works in the Chattanooga, North Georgia area.
Yeah,
It never has
would agree
been,
with that
and
statement.
it's never gonna be.
No.
And we don't like.
It's not your target audience,
Nope,
no.
and we don't like flashy hosts. We don't like loudmouths. We don't like anybody that's too overly
Well-
opinionated. Well, we do like loudmouths, but
Well,
I mean,
Dr. B.
Dr. B. I mean, but you know, you
That describes him perfectly right there. Everything
Yeah.
you just said. But he had something different.
he had panache, man, and he had
Yeah.
people loved him.
Yeah.
Because people,
The stunts he pulled.
but they grew up on the radio
man.
with him. You know what I mean? I mean, he cut his teeth, and everybody listening to him cut their teeth with him, and they rode that train with him for all those years, and they weren't going nowhere.
He had already kind of made a name for himself of picking basketball winners or claiming to pick
Yep.
basketball winners. And if you don't know the story, so in 1991, the senior amateur was going to be held at the honors course, and or no, it was at the amateur. I don't think it was a senior. I think it was just the regular amateur. And the guy that ended up winning it was a guy named Mitch Voges, if I remember correctly. And the guy was like 41 years old at the time. And Dr. B got on the air and said, there ain't nobody over 40 who's going to win that tournament in this kind of heat down here. And if he does, I'll eat a can of dog food on the air.
Yep, and he did.
Mitch Voges wins the amateur. And Dr. B, to his word, with nachos in hand and a can of Alpo.
Can Alpo.
And I think some nacho cheese and everything. I don't know if he ate the whole can.
I
but,
promise you, there was a bucket somewhere
but
nearby.
there, yeah,
And
he,
some Alka-Seltzer.
but he
Oh,
did
God.
it, and man, it. And you think, why would you do something like that? It
Because you
just
said you
turned
would.
that show on its ear,
Yep.
and it became
Huge.
must listen to
radio.
radio.
Well,
Well,
listen.
run
I think it's a super idea for us to come up
Yep.
with this. I think it's going to be very difficult to be correct on it because I know that we're going to have reasons that somebody else could have took somebody else's places. But when you're just trying to come to a Mount Rushmore, that means 4. Okay, yes, like,
Now, and,
like the 4 horsemen.
And are we doing?
We'll let you have a couple of honorable mentions.
Are we doing athletes too, or just
well, if you
Chattanooga
want to
sports?
name athletes,
You want to name some
person-
athletes, I'm fine with
that's
that.
fine, but
You
it's
can-
sports personalities.
It's sports personalities.
So if that
Okay.
athlete you think is
So-
greater than what that other person
So
brought
go
to the
over-
table, so be it.
Go over to Scenic City Sports. Scott or me one later tonight. We'll put a post up. We'll monitor it all week. And then when we come back here next Sunday, we will look at it again and see what everybody's opinion is on it, and we'll kind of go from there. But I think this will be something fun and audience interactive that we can kind of get an idea of what everybody's thinking. So take the time, come up with your 4, post it on the post, and then we will be back next week
Good luck coming
to
up with
see you
4.
guys again, and we will see who the winners are. We will see who the honorable mentions are, and we will go from there. But folks, that's going to do it
One of my
for
favorite
tonight.
signs right here.
That's
Not
right,
worse.
just 4. But that'll do it for us tonight, guys. We love you all. We'll see you next week on Scenic City Sports.
Well, the days are short and the nights are long. A room slowly fills with song. All I need is one reminder. Parkway Blue Blinders. Well, I begged and cheated and I borrowed for my life upon the road. I'm still looking for some gold at the end of my rainbow. Yes, and someday I will find her on a Parkway Blue Blinders. On a Parkway Blue like confetti in a New York parade on the parkway on an autumn day. Yes, the leaves fall